Ma'am, impersonating a naval officer is a federal offense, especially a SEAL commander. Now take off that jacket. The crowd of sailors and civilians waiting at the gate fell into a nervous silence, the air thick with second-hand embarrassment. The young master-at-arms, a man whose crisp uniform seemed a size too big for his experience, puffed out his chest, reveling in the authority he wielded. He pointed a gloved finger at the woman in the driver's seat of the unremarkable sedan. She was small, with dark hair pulled back in a simple, functional knot, and her face, devoid of makeup, was a canvas of calm observation. She wore an old, faded olive-drab flight jacket over a plain gray t-shirt, the fabric softened and worn by years of use, not fashion. But it was the small, barely visible golden trident insignia stitched above the pocket that had drawn the security guard's ire. He saw a woman who didn't fit his rigid, mental template of a warrior. He saw a fabrication, an insult to the uniform he so proudly wore. But when the fleet admiral, watching the security drill from a distant observation tower, zoomed in on his monitor and saw her posture, the relaxed set of her shoulders, the way her hands rested on the steering wheel, not gripping it, but merely present, a flicker of recognition, a ghost of a memory, stopped him cold. If you believe that true strength needs no announcement, type "quiet professional" below. The master-at-arms, Miller, continued his tirade, his voice growing louder to fill the void of her silence. Her lack of reaction was a void he found deeply unsettling. He had expected fear, or at least a stammered apology. Instead, he got nothing. Just a steady, unwavering gaze that seemed to see right through his uniform, his rank, and the brittle confidence propping them both up. "Do you hear me?" he demanded, leaning closer to her window. "This base is on high alert. We don't have time for stolen valor games. That trident," he said, tapping his finger near the insignia, "is earned with blood, sweat, and sacrifice by the toughest men this country produces. Men, not someone like you trying to get a discount at the exchange." A few of his junior guards snickered, emboldened by his arrogance. The woman's expression did not change. Her eyes made a slow, deliberate sweep of her surroundings. The guard post, the placement of the concrete barriers, the other guards and their fields of fire, the traffic patterns behind her. It wasn't a look of fear or defiance. It was an assessment. A quiet, continuous, professional assessment of the tactical environment. Her silence was not emptiness. It was a container for immense, disciplined competence. It was the calm before a storm, but Miller, in his ignorance, could only see the calm. He mistook her profound self-control for weakness, her professional observation for confusion. This was his first, and most critical, mistake. Suddenly, the world dissolved into noise. A piercing alarm blared across the naval base, its screeching cry signifying a real-world threat, not a drill. A heavy-duty truck, its engine roaring like a wounded beast, smashed through a secondary checkpoint a quarter-mile down the road, kicking up a plume of dust and debris. It was now careening toward the main gate complex, toward Miller, his team, and the woman in the sedan. Panic, raw and undisciplined, erupted. Miller's voice cracked as he shouted into his radio, his commands a frantic jumble of conflicting orders. Guards scrambled, fumbling with their rifles, their training evaporating in the heat of genuine crisis. They were all focused on the charging truck, the big, loud, obvious threat. But the woman, Commander Anya Sharma, moved with a different kind of energy. It was not the frantic energy of fear, but the focused, efficient energy of purpose. She didn't shout. She didn't scramble. She exited her car in one fluid, economical motion, her body low to the ground. Her eyes were not on the truck. She had already dismissed it as a diversion, a piece of loud, violent theater designed to draw every eye. Her gaze was fixed on the shadows, on the gaps in the chaos, on the real threat that noise was meant to conceal. The truck was indeed a decoy, a driverless rig aimed at the barricades. The true attack came from the opposite direction. 3 figures, clad in dark clothing, had used the pandemonium as their cover to slip through the perimeter fence. They now moved with lethal intent toward an approaching black sedan, the Admiral's official vehicle, arriving for his inspection of the drill. Miller and his team were completely oblivious, their backs turned, their attention consumed by the spectacle of the oncoming truck. They saw the fire, but not the assassins who lit it. Sharma saw it all. She moved not like a soldier, but like a force of nature. The first assailant, raising a suppressed pistol, found his wrist caught in a grip of impossible strength. Sharma didn't block his arm. She joined its momentum, twisting, and in a single, brutal motion, used his own weapon to disarm him while shattering his elbow against the sharp edge of a concrete barrier. The second attacker lunged, and she pivoted, becoming a phantom. She used the door of her own car as a shield and a weapon, slamming it into his knees. As he buckled, a precise, disabling strike to his throat silenced him instantly. The third, seeing his partners fall, hesitated for a fraction of a second. It was all the time Sharma needed. She closed the distance with 3 explosive steps and delivered a series of strikes so fast, so clean, and so brutally effective that he crumpled to the asphalt without a sound. It was over in less than 5 seconds. A symphony of quiet, violent competence. Then, a deafening silence fell, broken only by the distant crash of the decoy truck into the barricades. Miller and his men slowly turned, their mouths agape, to the sight of 3 neutralized hostiles and the small, unassuming woman standing calmly amidst them. Admiral Thorne's car screeched to a halt. His security detail, elite Marines, spilled out, weapons at the ready, forming a protective cordon around the vehicle. But the Admiral, a man with 40 years of service etched into the lines on his face, waved them off. He had seen the entire, impossible event through his reinforced windshield. He stepped out of the sedan, his presence alone a tangible force that seemed to settle the lingering chaos. He completely ignored the stunned and useless security team. His eyes, sharp and intelligent, were locked on one person only, Commander Sharma. He walked toward her, his stride measured and certain, his gaze a mixture of awe and profound respect. He stopped a few feet from her, taking in the scene, the 3 downed men, neutralized with surgical precision, and the woman, who was now calmly checking her hands as if she'd just finished some minor household chore. He then turned his head slowly, deliberately, and fixed his icy glare on Master-at-Arms Miller, who stood frozen, his face a mask of pale, horrified disbelief. The Admiral's voice, when it came, was not loud, but it cut through the air like a razor. "Master-at-Arms," he began, the words dripping with cold fury. "Is this the woman you were detaining for impersonating an officer?" Miller couldn't form a word. He just stared, his mind struggling to reconcile the loud, arrogant assumptions he had made with the silent, lethal reality he had just witnessed. Admiral Thorne didn't wait for an answer. He turned to his aide, a young lieutenant commander who was already holding a secured data slate. "Pull up the active service file for Commander Anya Sharma," the Admiral commanded, his voice ringing with authority. "Authorization code, Thorne Omega 7, the aide's fingers flew across the screen. The assembled security guards and the Admiral's own detail leaned in, the air crackling with anticipation. The mystery of the quiet woman in the worn jacket was about to be solved. The aide began to read, his voice clear and steady, but laced with a growing sense of wonder. "Sharma, Anya. Commander, United States Navy. Current assignment, Naval Special Warfare Development Group." A collective, sharp intake of breath swept through the onlookers. "DevGru. SEAL Team 6. The most elite, secretive, and lethal fighting force in the world." The aide continued, his voice now filled with reverence. "Active deployments, 23, details classified. Service awards include Bronze Star with Valor Device, Silver Star, Purple Heart with 2 gold stars, the Navy Cross." He paused, his eyes widening as he read the final entry. He looked up at the Admiral, then back at the woman, his expression one of pure awe. "And, sir, the Medal of Honor." A wave of shock rippled through the crowd. The Medal of Honor, the nation's highest award for valor, a recognition of sacrifice and courage beyond the call of duty. The jacket, the faded trident, they weren't props of stolen valor, they were relics of a living legend. Admiral Thorne absorbed the information with a grim nod, as if confirming a fact he already knew deep in his bones. He then did something that no one present had ever seen a 4-star fleet admiral do. He turned to face Commander Sharma, drew himself up to his full height, and rendered a slow, meticulous, and perfect salute. It was not the perfunctory gesture between officers. It was an act of profound, heartfelt respect. "Commander Sharma," he said, his voice now devoid of anger, filled only with deep admiration. "It is an honor to meet you in person. I've read the citations. All of them." He held the salute for a long moment before dropping his hand. Then, he turned his gaze back to the trembling Master-at-Arms Miller. "That jacket you ordered her to remove," the Admiral said, his voice low and dangerous, "was issued to her after Operation Nightfall. A mission so classified most of this base's senior staff doesn't have the clearance to even know its name. That trident was pinned on her chest by Admiral McCraven himself. You questioned her authority based on her gender and her size. You made assumptions. She made corrections. While you were making noise, she was neutralizing a threat that your entire team missed. A threat that could have cost us this entire command staff. You have just received the most expensive and valuable lesson of your career, young man. Competence is silent. Remember that." The story of what came to be known as the Gate Incident spread through the naval base like wildfire. It wasn't an official report. It was something far more powerful, a legend. It was whispered in the mess halls, recounted in the barracks, and shared with a sense of reverence among the enlisted and officers alike. The tale of the quiet, unassuming woman who had single-handedly stopped a Tier 1 threat while the official security force was distracted became a piece of institutional folklore overnight. Master-at-Arms Miller became its central cautionary figure. He wasn't dishonorably discharged. Admiral Thorne believed in lessons, not just punishments. Instead, Miller was reassigned to the training division, a public and deeply humbling demotion. His first assignment was to attend a mandatory after-action debriefing conducted by Commander Sharma herself. In a sterile conference room, she stood before a whiteboard and clinically, methodically, and without a single shred of emotion or personal vindictiveness, broke down every tactical failure his team had made. She used cold, precise language, pointing out their flawed positioning, their communication breakdown, and their critical failure of situational awareness. It was not an attack on him, but a dissection of his incompetence. For Miller, it was the most professionally brutal and transformative hour of his life. He finally understood that her silence had never been a weakness. It had been a weapon, a tool of observation he had been too loud to appreciate. Throughout the ensuing storm of attention, Commander Sharma remained an island of calm. She deflected every attempt at praise, every laudatory comment from senior officers. When a base newspaper reporter tried to get a quote from her about her heroism, her only reply was, "Protocols were breached." The vulnerability was corrected. Her focus was never on the past event, but on the future prevention. She treated the incident not as a moment of glory, but as a data point in a larger security equation. The day after the incident, as her legend was being cemented across the base, she was seen in a parking lot, quietly helping a young, flustered seaman change a flat tire on his car. She spoke to him not as a decorated hero, but simply as another sailor, offering quiet guidance and a steady hand. This act, witnessed by dozens, did more to solidify her myth than the firefight itself. It demonstrated that her core identity was not defined by the medals on her file, but by a deep-seated ethos of service and quiet competence. The security camera footage of her 5-second engagement became a legendary piece of training material. It was known simply as the Sharma Minute, a masterclass in economy of motion, threat assessment, and the stark, undeniable power of the quiet professional. The video was a silent testament to the fact that true authority isn't worn on a sleeve, it's demonstrated in action. A year later, the culture of security at Naval Station Norfolk had been fundamentally transformed. The changes were not superficial. They were systemic, born from a comprehensive, 300-page security review that Admiral Thorne had personally commissioned Commander Sharma to write. Her report was a masterpiece of tactical analysis, focusing on predictive threat modeling and human factor vulnerabilities, specifically, the danger of cognitive biases like the ones Miller had displayed. Checkpoints were redesigned, training protocols were rewritten, and a new emphasis was placed on teaching guards to look beyond the obvious, to listen to the silence, and to respect competence in whatever form it appeared. The most effective instructor in this new curriculum was, ironically, the former Master-at-Arms Miller. He stood before new recruits not as a hero, but as a living example of failure. He used his own story, his own arrogance and public humiliation as his primary teaching tool. He was a better instructor for his failure, a wiser man for his humbling. He taught his students to question their assumptions, to look for the quiet professional in the crowd, and to understand that the most dangerous threats are rarely the loudest. The story of Commander Sharma became more than just a legend. It became a parable, a core part of the base's identity, passed down from seasoned sailors to new arrivals. It was a constant reminder that the uniform doesn't make the warrior gives meaning to the uniform. Her legacy was not etched onto a plaque or a monument. It lived in the improved watchfulness of a young guard at Gate 3, in the healthy skepticism of a patrol officer assessing a situation, and in the institutional understanding that respect is not a right of rank, but a dividend of demonstrated competence. Sharma herself was long gone, reassigned to another classified corner of the world where her skills were needed. She left behind no statues, only a standard of quiet professionalism, of unshakable calm, and of a profound truth, that the most powerful voice is often the one that is never raised, and the greatest strength is the one that never needs to be announced. True legacy isn't what you leave behind in a file. It's what continues forward in the actions of others. For more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud assumption and where true strength defines their worth, subscribe to Unknown Heroine Tales.